What's going on, guys? Ronan here, back with part 2 of What If Ash Caught Latias. Guys thought I was kidding and having parts every single day for the next 2 months. Well, it's gonna be something that I'm gonna be doing for a while, and I have to do it extremely far in advance to make sure I have the content ready. But with all that being said, first thing I want to say is thank you for the support on the video that I know you guys have shown. I'm shooting this one extremely far in advance, but I'm just taking a gamble to say you guys are doing it. Second thing is, if you can check out this analytic bar right here, this is the percent that you guys are not subscribed. So if you could do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you'll never miss a single upload from my channel. But anyway, let's get back into the story, shall we? So this one, we're going to start off with Latias, and as it arrives back in Altamar. Things have changed. Latias has been gone for a little under a year now, but it has also become more powerful. As a matter of fact, it's far bigger than what it was when it left. But that's not saying much, because there are other species of it and Latios in the island now. Now Latias has been here for a while, and it's had its time to catch back up with Bianca and Lorenzo. Problem is Latias is realizing that it's not really fitting in here anymore. Altamar will always be home, but things have changed since it's been away. So it makes the decision that it's going to go find Ash. The good thing about this is, it being a psychic type, it'll always have a residual link with Ash. So kind of like a compass, it can kind of point itself in the right direction until it finds its trainer. With that being said, now we're going to cut over to Ash, as he is just arriving in the HOENN region. This region sports a lot of new Pokemon, most out of any Pokedex that had come since the original 151 to this point. But that's not all. This region is highly different. It's got a good balance of water and land, and that could come to play a huge role in how things shape up this time. But with all that being said, the things still happen as usual, where Team Rocket is hot on Ash's tail. They try to capture Pikachu, something gets wrong with it, it gets overcharged with electricity because of a magnet, and Ash ends up at Professor Birch's house, where he ends up roasting May's bike, and we kind of get a rehash of the same old story, where Ash gets a girl tailing him because he owes her something. That doesn't change. May ends up joining Ash on his journey, and May, just like the original, is struggling with how things are and what she's going to do. She doesn't really want to be a Pokemon trainer, she just wants to travel. But things from here on out for May pretty much play out the same as terms of discovering how to do contests and discovering that's stuff she wants to do. There might be a couple of small, maybe subtle differences here and there, but that we'll leave for later on. Anyway, back with Ash. This region is different because Ash only brought Pikachu with him. So now he has to capture a whole new set of Pokemon. But there is one thing that's going to happen here. Latias is not bound by borders, by oceans, or anything. It can go where it wants to go. And Latias is going to meet up with Ash right before they get to Petalburg City, and they find out that Norman is May's dad. So this will change things slightly. Instead of Ash having a one-on-one with Norman and just Pikachu and Vigoroth, it's going to be a 2-on-2 with Slakoth and Vigoroth. Unfortunately, Team Rocket getting involved still kind of puts things off the rails, and Ash decides that he'll come back when he has more Pokemon. But Ash still has to call Professor Oak and say, hey, Latias is here in HOENN with me, so can you send over its Pokeball? So now, before Ash even earns his first badge, before he makes it into the Petalburg Woods, he's got 2 Pokemon. Now this is going to lead us into the Petalburg Woods, and the episode where Ash actually is supposed to have his first catch of the HOENN region, Taylor. This is also an important episode because Ash meets back up with Brock here. He figured out his things with his family, and now he's back here to travel with Ash and his new friends, being May and Max. But that's not the main focus of the story. The main focus of the story is, should Ash catch Taylor? And I'm going to say, yeah, let's give it to him. And the reason for it is because Ash didn't catch Noctowl in the last one, and Swellow proved to be one of Ash's stronger Pokemon, of the HOENN region, but that's not a really high bar to climb. Ash and his friends move deeper into the Petalburg Woods, where Ash encounters his second catch of the HOENN region, Trico. And I'm just going to say it, there's no reason not to give Trico to Ash here. Trico was his ace of the HOENN region. It did have a little miniature arc here, but there's nothing conflicting with how Latias lines up here to where it would prevent Ash from actually catching it. So we're going to say he catches it, giving his total count before his first gym badge 4. Which that is going to play a huge role in how things play out. But anyway, Ash ends up getting to Rustboro City. This is where May discovers that she wants to compete in contests. This leads to her training over at the contest hall the day before, and Ash ends up picking up a new trait that becomes prevalent in this season of Pokemon. He starts training his Pokemon to learn new moves. Like here, when he's working with Pikachu, and he starts working with this character and its Furret to teach it Iron Tail. This will become a huge factor in how things play out in this region. But anyway, Pikachu goes through the whole works of trying to learn Iron Tail and everything like that. Ash is really determined to pick up from that lesson that he learned at the Johto League, not relying on his strongest Pokemon so much. But he does have Pikachu and Latias to cushion the blows if needed. Anyway, let's get into the gym battle. In the original, Ash fought Roxanne, and she had Geodude and Nosepass, while Ash used Trico and Pikachu. Here, I don't really see things changing too much. I will say this, Ash would probably be more inclined to try and teach Trico a grass type move, just like he taught Pikachu Iron Tail. So we're going to say, just to line things up a little bit with the games, we're going to give Trico Absorb here, giving it a little bit more of an advantage in the battles. That doesn't change the outcome, so to speak, though, because it's still going to be Pikachu and Trico versus the Geodude and Nosepass. Trico does still end up losing to the Geodude, even though it knows Absorb, and Pikachu ends up picking up the slack to take the win with both of them, giving Ash his first badge of the region. Latias didn't really have to change much here, because there's not really a point to where Ash would want to use it. But that won't last for very long, because now we're en route to Ash's next badge, Dewford Island. And this is where we meet Brawly, the laid-back surfer, which, I'm okay with it. I mean, HOENN does have a lot of water, so it's believable. The only thing that's really unbelievable is that he's a fighting type trainer. I originally thought he should have been a water type trainer, but whatever, we won't get into that too much. Here, Ash actually ended up having 2 battles with Brawly in the original. The first one, he used Trico and Tailo, which Trico ended up losing to Brawly when his Makuhita evolved into Hariyama. So Ash went on this training regimen to strengthen his Pokemon and become more at one with them, which was really the first time we'd seen this in the series. And he actually ended up with a new catch, which was Corphish. But that is where things are going to change here. Because you see Ash actually has 4 Pokemon here, which means that his choices are going to be different. So Ash is still on the roll of trying not to use his older Pokemon. I think here, Ash would end up going with Trico first. Now, Trico going first allows Ash to get the feel out for his Machop and Broly's battling style. Realizing that Brawly is not somebody to be messed around with, even though he's got a laid-back attitude, Ash would have to adapt very quickly. But Trico would still get the win against Machop. This brings it into Makuhita, which I do think that Trico could push Makuhita enough to where it would evolve. The only problem is that I don't think Trico could go the whole way through because it's been battling for so long. And Ash, realizing that he is at a massive disadvantage, he's going to need kind of a heavy hitter. This is where Latias would make her presence known. And honestly, because of it being so high level, being a legendary, and because it's one of Ash's strongest Pokemon from Johto, it's not going to really be a contest here. Latias is just going to sweep Hariyama because it's got the Psychic typing. And that's going to have a huge change on how things play out. Because now that Ash has his second badge firmly in his grasp, he's not going to have to stick around for training. Which means Trico ends up weaker, and he does not capture Corphish. This brings us into the next leg of our journey. We have a couple of encounters with Team Aqua, Team Magma, A couple more contests, things like that. There's not really any major captures that ever happened for Ash here. They really left him with 4 Pokemon until he got past the 4th gym. So we're just going to jump right into the 3rd gym, and that's the gym with Watson. Because of the way things happen in the anime, Ash just one-shotted this gym with Pikachu. It was kind of sad, really. I can't really say anything about that. I hate the way that they did it. And I would just say, just instead of having him get one-shotted, just give him the Electrike and have an actual battle with him. And in here, we would see Voltorb, Magneton, Electrike, and Electrike's still not strong enough to evolve yet. It does have a lot of skill, we'll say that. But Ash here, he's going to stay away from Latias. He ends up going with Trico, Pikachu, and Tailo. Now, one of the key things that I would like to point out here is Latias, because it has the ability to fly around and everything, that would kind of inspire Tailo here. So even though it may seem like it's going to slack because Latias is on the team, it's actually the exact opposite. It's going to push Tailo to want to become stronger. This allows it to kind of level up a little bit quicker, so it's going to be a bit of a higher level than it would in canon. But anyway, with all that aside, I think here is where we could give Trico its first actual win and allow it to beat the Electrike in the final round. Because Trico's gotten to the point now to where it's really mastered Absorb, and that would play a huge role in helping with its endurance going forward. Now we gotta move on, and it's during this time that Ash's Trico ends up learning a new move in Bullet Seed. So that'll give it 2 grass-type moves, which is very important going forward, because it really had a lack of those in the early parts of the gen. But that's really the only thing that happens for Ash. Tailo ends up getting stronger than it normally would in canon, and I think Trico, because of its personality, it's really got a lonely type nature, but it does enjoy a good battle to test its strength. I do think that it's seeing Latias and the power that it has would slightly inspire it to become stronger. So in kind of its own way, like Piccolo from Dragon Ball, when they were on King Kai's planet, he would train by himself. Kind of interacting with the Pokemon at times, but he would be more of a loner. But that's beside the point. I do think that would spark the next change in this gen, in Ash wanting to give Tailo a move that it can fight off some weaknesses with. So it would also end up mastering the move Steel Wing and getting rid of Wing Attack. So we'll just get that out of here. But that brings us to our 4th batch. Now this one will have a massive change. And the reason for it is because Ash doesn't have Corphish in this timeline. And because he doesn't have Corphish, Corphish was the one who originally won this batch. So we're going to have to make some adjustments. Not really a big deal though. So in this battle, Ash faces Flannery. And she has a Slugma, a Macargo, and her Torkoal. Ash has a well-rounded set of Pokemon here. I think the team that Ash would end up using here would be Pikachu, Tailo, and Latias. He would be more inclined to not use a Pokemon with a type disadvantage like Trico. And unfortunately, I think in the end, it would be Latias that takes it, just being able to really overwhelm Torkoal because it can control its fire-type moves. So with that being said, Ash would clinch his 4th gym badge fairly easy, and it would come down to Torkoal and Latias, don't get me wrong, but it still wouldn't be that much of a contest. Speaking of contests, we got a couple of stops. We also head into the Valley of Steel, where Ash gets his next team member, which in normal canon would be Torkoal. And just for argument's sake, so Ash has a fire type this region, we're going to let him get Torkoal. I don't really see a reason why he shouldn't get it. Torkoal wasn't really a heavy hitter, but at the same time, there's nothing that Latias really presents a change to that deviates it from being caught. So yeah, Ash secures his 5th member with Torkoal. But there is one key thing that happens here. Trico does eventually evolve when it battles the Exploud, just like in the original. I'll say this though, Trico being a slightly higher level as a Grovyle does present it more of a rebel attitude, a little bit like Charmeleon, but not much. It does kind of get its loner streak going, but it still listens to Ash. So after that, we just move right on to the 5th gym battle, where Ash has to face Norman for the 2nd time this season. But some things could change here. He has the option for Latias, although Ash doesn't really want to use it because he's kind of getting to the point to where it feels like a free win. So Ash still has the normal Pokemon he used in the regular timeline, so we'll just go with those. Torkoal versus Slakoth, and Torkoal wins. but then it gets taken out by Vigoroth. Pikachu versus Vigoroth, where Pikachu ends up winning, and then Slacking versus Grovyle, where Grovyle has to activate its Overgrow and ends up taking out Slacking. I will say this though, Grovyle is a hint stronger than it was in the original, because it wants to push itself with Latias being around. It wants to be the star of the team. It doesn't really want people to know that, but it's not going to sit back and let everybody else outclass it. I will also say that he does know Leaf Blade, and his Absorb has become Mega Drain. So that's a huge win for Grovyle in itself. Now with this, we move on, and before we get to the 6th gym badge, we end up having a point where Tailo ends up evolving into a Swellow. Now, Swellow is actually one of my favorite members of Ash's HOENN team. I don't know what it is about this bird, but I kind of like it better than any of Ash's other regional birds. I think the only one I actually liked more was Talonflame, and that's only because it has the fire typing. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. We're in HOENN, not in Kalos. That's for a later date. Anyway, after Tailo ends up evolving into Swellow, we end up in Fort Tree City, where Ash gets to go one-on-one with Winona, the flying type master. Here, things are going to change. They're going to change heavily. And the reason for it is because Ash doesn't have to resort to Grovyle in this one. There's no need. Yeah, I know he would probably want to use some of his other Pokemon so they have the chance to keep their weight. But at the end of the day, I don't see Ash having to. So the battles would kind of play out the same. The only difference is instead of Grovyle taking out Tari out, it would be Latias. So Pikachu would get the win over Pelipper, Latias would get the win over Altaria, and then I feel like Ash would pull back Latias here and just keep it on reserves to let Swellow face off against Swellow. And in the end, we still get the same result, with Ash earning his 6th badge because Swellow was able to best its counterpart. Now, with that being said, there's a couple of things that have to happen here. First things first, Ash goes on this training binge with Swellow again to learn Aerial Ace, which is very important, I think. I also think that by this point, Mega Drain for Grovyle would end up becoming Giga Drain. So that way it's got an attack type move for grass types that's on the special side and not just physical. I will say this, I feel like out of all of Grovyle's moves, Bullet Seed would start to become less reliant on, which would end up phasing it out for another move, but we'll get to that in a little while. Anyway, back to the story. So after they master the Aerial Ace and May ends up getting her contest ribbon, they're going to have to take off to the high seas. And this is where the next big battle is going to happen. Because unlike previous generations, Ash actually gets to fight an Elite Four member here. And not only that, it is the strongest member of the HOENN Elite Four, Drake, the Dragon-type Master. This battle was extremely one-sided in the anime. Extremely one-sided. And it was sad. But we're going to change that. Because Grovyle being stronger, Swellow being stronger, Latias being stronger, hell, even Torkoal's stronger. Not by much, but it's there. It's noticeable. And there is that time when it tried to swim as a Torkoal, fire type. Yeah, we'll forget about that. Anyway, the battle would end up happening, and Ash would end up using Grovyle, Latias, and Swellow here. And this would allow Ash to push Drake to Salamence. And in the end, it would end up being Salamence versus Latias battle. Don't get me wrong here. I still think that Salamence would win. But the point is, Ash is contesting Elite Four level members now. And that's a huge thing. Although it's with a legendary on his team. But besides that, Ash has shown that he's demonstrated a unique mastery to a dragon type in Latias. And it obeys his every command. There's nothing that it won't do for Ash. But anyway, with all that being said, after the events of that battle, they move on to Moss Deep City, and Ash has to end up taking on the Psychic-type twins, Tate and Liza. Now this one's kind of rough to remember, because Thunder Armor, yeah, that was a thing. And I know this could be interpreted as Swellow's ability Guts activating, but we're just going to forego that conclusion and include one of the Pokemon that Ash should have had here, Grovyle, in the battle. Yeah, Grovyle would be a lot better. And we're going to have it tag with Latias. So Grovyle and Latias, I still think fits the same dynamic as Pikachu and Swellow. And the reason for it is Latias is big. I mean, it's grown, and it's bigger than Grovyle. Grovyle can easily mount its back like Pikachu does to Swellow. And this would allow for a unique combination of attacks from those two, especially when they have to take the battle outside, because Team Rocket once again decided to interfere and screw things up. But all that being said, the two would secure the win, and Ash would get his 7th HOENN badge. Now, we have a couple of stops before the final badge of this region, and the first one is the clash of legendaries between Groudon and Kyogre. I do think that Latias would play a huge part here. The reason for it is because it's a dragon type, and it can also fly. Not only that, but I think it would be great to see Ash mounting Latias next to Lance and his Dragonite. So anyway, after that's out of the way, we have one more catch of the HOENN region, and that would be everybody's fan favorite hat, Snorunt. I personally don't have an issue with Snorunt, and I don't think Latias alters the story enough for Ash to miss this catch. So Latias, you're not really doing your job this region, but Ash ends up with Snorunt. Now, we end up in Sutapa City, where we meet Juan, the very, very flamboyant gym leader of this city. The terms are set for this battle. It's going to be a 5-on-5, with a double battle in the beginning, and then 3 individual battles until one side has no Pokemon left. Ash can still change as he desires. The key factor is Ash didn't use Torkoal because this is a water-type gym, even though it knows how to swim, but that's beside the point. And also, Ash doesn't have Corphish, and Corphish did kind of pick up some of the slack in this gym, but Ash has Latias, and I think Latias is going to make a much better move than Torkoal would. So the double battle started out with Pikachu and Snorunt versus Seaking and Celio. Snorunt quickly got overwhelmed, so Ash ends up throwing in his ever-faithful Lobster, and they take the win. Here, I think instead of the Lobster, we're going to get Latias, and Pikachu and Latias just do a clear and sweep. They just clean house. Now, there is one thing about this battle that I was deeply upset about when they first did it when I was a kid. How they treated Grovyle. Here, we're going to give Grovyle a little bit more swag and allow him to take out the damn Love Disc. I don't think Attract is an excuse for it not to be able to battle. That's a move that really comes down to the bond between trainer and Pokemon. And I really think that Grovyle has a better bond with Ash than that. I mean, it activated Overgrow against Slaking. So, yeah, we're going to allow that to be changed just because it slightly irritates me a little. But anyway, the match would still play out the same, with Latias picking up the slack where Corphish normally did. And in the end, it would still come down to Pikachu and its body slam of Milotic to win the battle. Because, yeah, it essentially just power drove Milotic into the water and then supercharged thundered it. But anyway, besides the point, I don't think Latias would have gotten taken out here. I think it would have been a final choice, and Ash would have sent back in Pikachu before Latias. And it still would have been on reserve. But anyway, Ash now firmly has his 8 badges, and we can move on to the next event, which is Ash teaching Snorunt how to use Ice Beam. The main thing here is that it took a while for Snorunt to learn Ice Beam, and when Team Rocket tried to steal Pikachu and Snorunt, that's when it evolved into a Glalie. So that still happens as normal, and now we have our final team of 6 for the HOENN region. Pikachu, Swellow, Grovyle, Latias, Torkoal, and Glalie. Not too much of a change at this point. But with that being said, they move on to the Grand Festival. May still finishes the same, and then they get a chance to move on to the Evergrande Conference, and this is where things are going to start to heat up. I would say that Ash still handles all of his preliminary matches the same way. The only difference would be Latias would replace Corphish. Now, with that being said, we're going to get to the first 6-on-6, which is not the top 16, it's actually the top 32, and that's against Katie. In this battle, we actually get to see Katie on full display, and her final Pokemon ends up being a Walrein, which I think would actually be a problem, and it would present so much of a problem that Latias would end up getting its first loss of the HOENN region. which is a big deal. Luckily though, Ash still has Grovyle on his belt, and Grovyle is still able to pick up the win the way it did before. I will say this though, the battle with Walrein is intense, and the one major change that we're going to have here is that this battle triggers the evolution of Grovyle into Sceptile, and that's going to have a great side effect, because one of the things that Sceptile was trying to learn as a Grovyle but it couldn't, Dragon's Breath. After watching Latias use that move countless times, it knew that it could be a move that would really help it. So Ash and it were working on it, but it couldn't quite get it until it became a Sceptile. So that brings Sceptile's moves to Dragon's Breath, Leaf Blade, Giga Drain, and Quick Attack, which I know it's not that huge of a difference, but I think it offers a little bit more diversity. But anyway, at this point, we move on to the next round, which honestly, this whole battle was just frustrating with me. This is where Ash faces his rival of the HOENN region, which he didn't even meet until like the 7th gym, Morrison. This guy was voiced by Sean Schimmel, and I love him for his work in Dragon Ball, but this character is frustrating to me. He didn't want to battle Ash, and he was having second thoughts, kind of like a reverse Richie mentality, and it ended up costing him the battle. And I'm just going to say it here. Ash starts off the same way. Instead of using Corphish, he uses Latias, and he just levels his team. Ash eventually gives him the courtesy by changing out Latias for Sceptile, and it still doesn't help. Sceptile ends up being the one to take down Matang, and yeah, that battle goes by pretty quickly. So that's all I gotta say about that. But anyway, now let's lead into the main reason why you're here. The point when Ash would have lost the Evergrande Conference, his battle against Tyson. And I know you guys are interested on how this is going to play out. Well, let's get into it. You see, Tyson has a very, very, very stacked team. He's got a Meowth that is, like, honestly, a game-breaking Meowth. Walks around in boots. It's got diversity in its moves. I mean, I love that Meowth. We're just going to say it. But he's also got a Sceptile and a Donphan. And he's also got a Hariyama. Let's not forget Shiftry. Fully evolved plus dark. That could be important. And then, what was that last one? A pseudo-legendary Metagross. They really stacked this team against Ash. They stacked it against him hard. And they didn't want him to win. This was the point where we're going to reset and skip him off to the next generation. But here, we don't have to worry about that. And the reason for it is because Ash has Latias, he now has Sceptile, and overall, aside from Glalie, his core team is stronger. So this battle would have a couple of interesting turns in it. I still think it would start off the same way it did, where Ash sent out Glalie and Tyson sent out Sceptile, and it just erupts in a huge explosion, and then yeah, both of them are unconscious. That's a great way to start the battle. It proves that this battle is going to be more intense than the rest of them. Now, with that being said, things would play out a little differently here. And the reason for it is because Tyson would normally send out Shiftry here, and Ash would send out Torkoal. But I think instead he would try and bait Ash by sending out Hariyama. So Ash wanted to get an easy win, would end up sending out Latias. And while Latias does have a type advantage, and it does end up taking down Hariyama, this would allow a free switch-in to the one Pokemon that could be a problem, Shiftry. And when Ash tries to recall Latias, unfortunately, one of Shiftry's more devious moves makes its presence known when it uses Pursuit, allowing it to strike Latias. And because Latias is being recalled, the damage it's pretty severe. And unfortunately, it doesn't knock out Latias, but it's going to have consequences. This would then run Ash to send out Torkoal to take out Shiftry, and then we would move into Donphan, which would end up taking out Torkoal because of how it is. Ash would send in Swellow, and Swellow would end up taking out Donphan, just like in the original. Now, this is where we get to the penultimate spot. All he's got left is Meowth and Metagross. On the other hand, Ash still has Swellow, Latias, Pikachu, and Sceptile. And I think that this is where things are going to take a turn for a much different line than what originally happened. You see, Swellow ended up cracking the armor of Metagross, allowing for a brief moment of hope when Ash was able to send in Grovyle, but then it got tanked, and then Pikachu had to take it down, leaving just Pikachu exhausted versus Meowth. But in this timeline, I think that Swellow cracking that armor would play out much differently here. And the reason for it is because Ash is going to follow up with Sceptile right after. Sceptile's stronger. It's an evolutionary stage higher, plus it's at a higher level. Even if Latias has been severely wounded, I don't think that it would make a difference here. I mean, in all honesty, Pikachu is the only one that hasn't battled. There's no reason for Ash not to lead with it and at least try and cause some damage if it can't win. Unfortunately for the Meowth, Pikachu at full power proves to be too much, and Ash ends up taking this. It's actually kind of a hollow victory because he still has 3 of his Pokemon left, to Tyson only having 1. It's kind of a repeat of what happened. But here is where things go off the rails a little bit for our young hero. You see, I'm going to say that Ash ends up making it all the way to the finals in HOENN here. And I'm going to say that Ash actually ends up winning the finals in HOENN. I think it's completely plausible because of the things that have changed on Ash's team. Latias being there is a driving force for everybody to want to get stronger. For Sceptile to want to evolve, to learn Mega Drain and Giga Drain, and to trade out its Bullet Seed for a Dragon's Breath. For Torkoal to up its game, and I would say even in this version, it ends up evolving Overheat into Heat Wave. I would also say that Swellow being around Latias and having something of that speed around would end up making it so it can fly faster and hit harder. Overall, Ash's team is much more rounded in this version for HOENN, allowing him to take the Victory Road tournament. Now, the question here that always comes to pass is what happens after somebody wins the Victory Road tournament? Well, A, you could speculate that that's it. They're the champion of the region. Or B, they have to go on to face the Elite Four. I'm going to go with option B, because if you haven't seen my other what-ifs, I really enjoy including the Elite Four in these ones. But this is where Ash's championship run comes to an end. I would say he manages to get past Sydney. I would say he manages to get past Phoebe. But unfortunately, I feel like when he hits Glacia, Ash is going to be severely outmatched. I feel like Glacia and her mastery of the Ice type would be too much for Ash to handle. Fortunately, Ash can overcome one Ice type when he's at a disadvantage. But unfortunately, this team just has too many Ice type weaknesses for Ash to overcome. Sceptile's Grass, Latias is Dragon, and Swellow's Flying. I just feel like half of his team would be made inert from the beginning. So Ash's run for the actual championship would end there. He wouldn't even get a chance to rematch Drake. He wouldn't get a chance to face Steven. It's sad, really. But that doesn't mean Ash's Gen 3 run is over. Because in the next part, Ash is going to be returning to Kanto. And he's going to have to face the final frontier. But anyway, that's all I had for today's part. So how'd you feel about Ash's journeys through HOENN with Latias? Do you feel that all the changes that were made, even though slightly subtle, were accurate? How do you feel about Ash not getting Corphish? Do you think I would be right on that aspect? Do you think I was wrong? How do you feel about Ash actually winning this league, but kind of petering out when he gets into the Elite Four? I just couldn't think of a conceivable way he could get past Glacia if he's just using his HOENN team. And especially since how I kept it at the point to where he only had 6 Pokemon total, which is a glaring problem with Ash going into future generations. but that's something we'll leave for a different video, which I'm sure you guys have probably already seen at this point. Anyway, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow, because Ash is returning to Kanto for the Battle Frontier, and I'm sure you guys are going to want to see that one. But anyway, with all that being said, we're going to sign out the video the best way we know how, by thanking the sponsors, the patrons. Silverheart Soul, Robert, Vegito Gaming 78, Andrew McCartney, Holosif, Julian Rodriguez, Ruben Watson, Lord Explosion Murder, Assassin 139, Flyer 943, Shadow Dragon, Tavern Landlord, K McKnight, Drax, True Vault, Dalen Silva, Fox King, Dalian Poteet, Warren E. Taylor, Plus Ultraman, Megger, Mike Logan, Team Valor, Kendall Green, and Earth Dragon. Thank you all very much for your support. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.